What is going on, smiling faces? We are bringing you the happy and healthy news, making sure we bring the positive every single day. And today's topic, this week's topic has been all about relationships, romantic, platonic, just every relationship. And as I've been saying, been mentioning in some way, shape, or form, relationships are rocket ships. So it's a heavy weight. Can you carry it? I'm talking about success. More specifically, I'm talking about successful relationships. Successful relationships take endurance. I'm not just talking about love, I'm talking about family, I'm talking about friendships. Do you have the endurance for it to be successful? And this time I'm gonna be talking more so about myself because I think it's a good frame. Because I could talk about clients for forever. I will be talking about clients constantly just because I think it's important not to talk anecdotally, but to talk about real life because that's what people learn the most. That's what I know I learn the most. And when it comes to this endurance, when it comes to relationships, as I said, relationships are rocket ships. As I said, life is about conversations, decisions, and people. Those are big three things that really determine so much about your life. Excuse me. And when I was growing up, I'm the middle child. I'm one of three. And when I was growing up, at 8 months, I was 8 months old. Obviously, I don't remember. My father made a decision. Throw some judgment aside and just listen to the message. My father made a decision where he said, it was me and my sister at the time, that he wasn't going to be there. He left the family. My sister's a couple years older, so she's roughly two at the time, and I'm 8 months old. My father said I wasn't gonna be there, and I know it's kind of the same old story, right? And I had to figure some things out in life, and around 14, 16 years old, lots of different things happened in between. My father came back into my life. I was angry. I was confused. I mean, I was 16 years old. I was hit puberty. I'm in that pubescent stage, so I'm just full of piss and vinegar. There's no other way around it. But I was so mad. I was triggered. I was just, and that, we worked. There was a very cantankerous situation, and a huge shout out to my father, because the story has a great ending. But it's real. It's very, it's real. But throughout different spots of my life, 14 to 16, and, my father has always, worked to kind of undo some past things, that what he wasn't there for. But it wasn't until I was about 30 years old. And again, I'm talking about endurance. I think things really clicked. And I started recognizing that people make decisions based upon variables we have no mother fudging idea what was going on at the time. All we see is that end result. And anybody, and this is any relationship, listen up. But we make these decisions. And it was about 30, 31 years old. I started realizing man, maybe my dad, I didn't understand things. I started seeing more of the world, started seeing more of life, and that's fine. And, a couple years later, my son came into the picture, and I love my son so much. My God, I do. I swear he's my everything. We're taking a trip. We're going to be going to speak in Nashville this weekend. I'm super excited. Shout out to everyone who's going to be there. We're going to have a great time. We're going to be talking about scaling things, emotionally, physically, financially, spiritually. But when my dad came back into the picture, it was just such a great thing because I recognized that I was stuck on what was and that was what I wanted. And I own that completely. Was my father right? Emotionally, he made some decisions. He was right. Emotions aren't right. They might not be accurate or might not be accurate for this environment, but they're right. That's what you feel. I can't argue with that. But I was so frustrated and stuck on the fact that what I needed it to look like. I needed it to look like this. And I couldn't get by this ideal of what I wanted. Or maybe it was just the picture of how I saw it. Because around by the time my son was born, I recognized that the picture that I wanted is great, but it doesn't change what I can start working on. From that day when my father, it was even a little bit before my son was born, me and my father, I don't know where, I do know. I mean, we worked so hard at being in one another's lives. We worked, really hard. And it wasn't one of those things where we were like, all right, go team. But it was, hey, son, how you doing? And we would talk every now and again. And I grew up, I wasn't surrounded with people saying, I love you. I wasn't surrounded by people, patting me on the back, letting me know I can do it. But I knew that I had love, but I didn't have love in that way. And that used to anger me, used to hurt me, used to frustrate me. And, again, around that time, in my 30s, I really started, early 30s, I really started to say, like, I want more. And I realized that I was so focused on ideals. And it took so much guts, so much of the desire to do better. It was tough. It was hard. It was frustrating. It drove me bonkers. But we still kept working at it. And it was, both of us. Hey, how are you doing? Hey, father. Hey, son. Just doing that, checking in on my son. And then somewhere along the line, now me and my dad, and this has been for years now, we talk every single day, multiple times a day. Multiple times a day. And we were talking about this a couple days ago. And he said, son, I don't know how we got here, but I love it. And I absolutely love it. And the reason why I'm talking about this is because sometimes, whether it is a romantic relationship, it could be a family member, it could be a friendship, it could be just some relationship in life. We are sold this picture of that it has to look like this. And we get this embedded and stuck into our brains and psychology. And when it doesn't look exactly like what we want, or we don't see the steps that it takes to get some people there, or maybe we don't see those steps, we start getting this belief that screw it, it's not easy, I don't want to do it anymore. And and this was also brought to you by a statistic that really surprised me as well. It was women, gosh, give me a second, I read exactly what it is. There's a very alarming statistic about the future. In 2030, 45% of women will be single and childless. 45%. And I was just sitting back thinking before we were going to do this, this show. And I was like, what is the big common denominator here? Yeah, you can say there's lots of different variables, but I am a huge believer of people do not realize how much effort goes into relationships, like real effort. When we talk about love, whether again with my father or your own father, your own siblings, parents, whatever, or just maybe your mother, your boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, things like that. We all want this idea of what love looks like or what caring looks like, but it takes effort, it takes endurance. I'm not saying be no fool. I'm not saying stick around in situations where you're being treated less than. But do you have the endurance to be better? Do you have the endurance and the courage to make adjustments and recognizing that people are going to be people? They're going to let you down. They're going to over deliver sometimes. They're going to excite you. They're going to make you sad. They're going to do things that just don't make any sense. But do you have the endurance to see it through? Because you got to go back. And, we could blame these things. We could blame social media. We could blame TV, where they show these images of people who just seem so happy. And I think, in fact, I know this, people have been sold such a false bill of goods that when the going gets tough, people just get going. And they think that love was someone's always going to be there to wipe your bottom as we get older, to be there and, kiss your boo-boos and win those wins. That takes so much endurance. And not that it's raw, not that you have to belittle yourself, but are you human enough to understand that there's another human there? Can you get by some of the things that you've been through to recognize that if they had known better, they probably would have done better? And quite honestly, we don't know all the variables that shape that person that you do love, and they might not be showing love the way that you would like, but they had variables shaped into who they are. And as my mentor, taught me, and it took me so long to embrace this, and I'm going to share this with you, is it's better to understand than to be understood. And once I got to that place of understanding about what relationships take in terms of sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Sometimes you're going to get on each other's mother effing nerves. They're going to drive you up a wall. My lady drives me up a wall, and I tell her, it's like, you drive me up a wall, but I love you. Like when you get to that place of understanding where I'm working on being better, and it might not be displayed right now, and you realize that at the very end of all those problems, there's such a reward for you. And that's why I say it's endurance, because we don't, in our society, like a ruler, right? You see that 1 inch, you see the 2 inch, you see the 3 inch. And that's how life is for many times, especially when we see highlights on social media. But before you even get to that 1 inch, before you even get to the 2 inch, there's these little notches that are in the wood, these little notches. And they're so small because we tend to think, oh, in these, milestones, fall in love, boom, and then get engaged, and boom, and then get married. We see kind of these mile markers, but we don't see the little steps there. The fact that they annoy you, the fact that they know your triggers and do their best around them, the fact that sometimes they don't fall into this upper echelon place where you like them to be, and they might fall short. But do you have the endurance to get to that next mile marker? Do you have the endurance to get to that 1 inch mark? Do you have the endurance to say that I hung in there? So when I was reading that statistic, when I was looking it up, and granted, every statistics has a bias, right? I mean, every research has a lot of bias with it. But just looking at that off a jump street, I was amazed that 45%, and I am such a huge believer that people are not being, told the truth about the effort that it takes to make things work. Yes, you see people loving each other and holding hands. It's not always like that. Some of the strongest relationships that I ever see where they ain't going nowhere. They fuss and fight like you would not believe. I'm not saying they're throwing things and, diminishing each other, but they go at it. And, I sit there when these things are happening and I'm just like, this is what it looks like. I have the pleasure of working with so many different people over the years, and I got to see the ins and outs in relationships. And I wanted to tell people today that it takes endurance to see success. We get it when we're at the gym. We get it when we're climbing the corporate ladder. You got to do it every day. You got to be consistent. You got to show up early. Sometimes you got to be late. Sometimes you got to be friends with people you don't even like, but it's the fact that you get to get the knowledge and that kind of mentorship. It's the same exact thing in love and any relationship that you want. Sometimes you got to be there for each other when you might not be able to hold it together yourself. Sometimes that you are going to have to pull those all-nighters, having fun, playing with each other, enjoying things. Sometimes you got to have the endurance to get those endorphins going. You know what I'm talking about. But everything in life requires some sort of exchange, whether it's your time. I mean, just some sort of resource exchange, like your time, your energy, and emotions tied to the energy spot. But in order for you to get to those milestones, you have got to put your work in. It gets tough. It gets frustrating. I get it. I was so frustrated with my dad, like I was talking about with earlier. But you know what? I knew in order for me to get to that place where I can look at my dad and say, I love you. It wasn't until a year and a half ago, my dad said, I love you. And some people might say, well, there's something wrong with that. That's not the way that he shows love. And as I said yesterday, and thank you for letting me know, you know who you are, that you appreciated that. For 1,000 people, there's 1,000 different ways to love. He might not have said it, but he was showing it, but with his endurance, with his, steadfast and consistency. And it's so important for people to recognize it takes time to understand a person. It takes time to understand yourself. I am 41 years old now, and I'm sitting back and I'm like, wow, how much grace did I give myself to even understand me? I'm so thankful that my lady has stuck with me through thick and thin, because it takes endurance for us to get here. Just like for you in many relationships in your life, it took endurance for you to get there. It takes guts, it takes courage, but I'm telling you, some of the worst fights you're going to have will bring you closer together. And people who have been through it know what I'm talking about, because you know who has your back. You know what unconditional love is if you've never experienced it. And I didn't really experience that until I started getting older. You start recognizing that you might not be perfect, but this person loves you because and in spite of your quirks. And when you get to that place of it takes effort, and once I think collectively as society, I'm not trying to preach here, I'm just giving a perspective, that number 45% of all women will be single and childless. And I'm not saying, again, there's a percentage of it. There's got some things going on. I get that completely. 45% just could have said, hey, I need a realistic picture of what a relationship looks like, that it's okay to have an argument. It's okay to be frustrated. And sometimes it's not a one-day thing. Sometimes you could be upset with each other for a time. They could be in a place, they could be going through things, and that's okay, because that's how we do. We grow and we go. But do you have the endurance to see that success? This is what it takes for us to, come together as a society, but also to make these relationships flourish. Be a human, understand that there's a human, and understand you both are still figuring things out. None of us were given an instruction manual with this thing. Not one of us. Because if you got it, I would damn sure love for you to pass it to me. But when you start looking at that person on the other end is dancing with life just like you are, and you might be doing the Macarena, but guess what? They're doing the electric slide. Change the tune. Hang in there till the DJ changes that music. Hang in there till all of a sudden you both catch your breath and ready to go again. Hang in there to see it what you want, and then you can get to ideal, but it takes work and you cannot skip it. I want everybody to have a great weekend. I'm going to see you all Monday. We're going to be diving even deeper into relationships. because relationships are the spice of life. They're everything. I hope everyone, again, if you have any questions, drop a comment, send me a message. I love the comments. I appreciate the feedback. I'm always working on being better, and I couldn't do this without you. I'll see you all Monday. Have a great weekend. Take care. Stay happy with Happy Meals.